A couple of times in the course of my almost 20 years of ministry, I have taken time off from doing church ministry. I wrote a book at one point, and then I built Spirit Expressing into something else. Long story, not important. I thought that the last time that happened, when I left Dallas and left the church in Dallas and focused on Spirit Expressing, I thought, well, this is more what I want to do. You know, I don't have a board to deal with. I have relatively way fewer bills to pay. You know, and like as Sean, I think Sean and I probably are two of the, he said modestly, two of the most in-demand speakers in the movement. Yes, I thought, well, I can always guest speak. And as Sean does, I have, you know, a repertoire of talks that I can give and have given, and it's never the same talk twice, but I'm comfortable with it. And that's great. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't take me long to realize that something was missing. What I thrive on is not a one-off talk, but an ongoing conversation with the same people, so that we can grow together, and so that we develop an understanding, and so that we develop, you know how you, with family and friends, you develop a kind of shorthand, so you understand each other more easily. And I really missed that, and that is what led me to being open to visiting Hartford. And the minute I walked in the doors, I knew that I was home. So, and that gave me the opportunity to get to know Sean a lot better. David and I knew each other first, and Sean and I have been friends for a while, but now we're just up and down the highway. And since Sean apparently loves to drive, he just, you know, thinks nothing of bombing up the highway to do some shopping and to have lunch. You didn't know this about Sean, you knew this about Sean. So our churches are sort of reaping the benefits, I hope, of that. In that we are going to be more involved with each other. So as I worked on today's talk, I thought, no, I don't want to do a one-off. I want to continue a conversation, you know, because you're going to be seeing more of me. As Wendy said, Sean has asked me to be a part of the retreat, and we're going to do this swap every once in a while just because it's fun, you know, just because it's great to see new faces, and it's great to see how you've changed and grown since I've been last here. You know, and for you to hear probably how I've changed and grown, because certainly my vision of what this is all about, Alfie, changes daily. Changes daily. You know, sometimes I think somebody's going to notice someday that I have pretty much said all there is to say. You know, there is nothing new to say about spiritual truth. There's nothing new to say about the principles that are absolutely how we are meant to live our lives and express our spiritual power. There's nothing more to say about why we're here in human purpose, which is to create that new consciousness that Jesus calls the kingdom of heaven. Consciousness when we are making all of our choices from the Christ within us, rather than from the fears and the stories and the past that we have accumulated in our minds. We're here to do that. Why are we here to do that? Don't know. I have no idea. Because it is a part of the creative process, and creation isn't something that happened, you know, X number of years ago and ended on a Sunday. It's an eternal process. Creation is the very nature of God. The first thing we know about God in the Bible, in Genesis, is that God is the force that moves upon the chaos and brings order out of chaos. And the next thing we learn is that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and all God is at that point is that creative power. So we are that creative power manifest, so that our choices can create and continue that process of creation that maybe never had a beginning, but that certainly rolls along and along. So there's nothing really new to say about that, and yet there's always more to discover about its potential, isn't there? You know, we think we get a handle on it. You know, I'm never more dangerous than when I think I've figured it out. You know, there's that Zen saying, you know, follow anyone who asks the question, run from anyone who has the answer, you know, because it's a process. Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, said, I always reserve the right to change my mind. You know, not to change my mind about principle, but to change my mind about how it expresses and how I'm meant to work with it. Because if we've been doing our work at all, that has to change as we go along, you know. That, to me, is the absolute essence of unity, is that we see this and understand it as a process. I think that we are at a fork in the road in our spiritual movement forward. We are periodically at that same fork, but we are certainly there today. And one road says that we are here to be obedient. And if we are sufficiently obedient, then after we die, there will be a reward. And if we aren't sufficiently obedient, after we die, there will be punishment. Who didn't grow up with that basic belief? You know, you have to do what you're told. You have to obey the letter of the law as the law was created, as the law was defined. And today there are people who still believe, and you know, honorably and honestly believe, that that is our spiritual purpose. It is to obey the laws. You know. There are others of us, of which unity is a part, who say, no, we're here to create. We're here to create new possibilities. We're here to use the laws as tools that help us to move forward on our spiritual path. And we point specifically to the teachings of Jesus as absolute verification of that truth. Because Jesus was constantly being challenged by people saying, you can't do that. It says in the law. And Jesus used one of his greatest teaching tools to say, that was then, this is now. You have heard it said, but I say to you, there's a higher dimension. I say to you, there's a bigger possibility. There's a more loving way to see it. It isn't that the law is wrong. It's that it's time for you to move beyond strict, limited obedience to the law out of, and why do we obey the law? What is the energy behind our obedience? Fear, absolute fear. If we don't, God will punish us. Jesus said it's time to think about love. It's time to use the laws lovingly. It's time to see that they are a means to get us to a higher place. So if we're still back in the days of Leviticus, we have wasted a lot of time and a lot of lifetimes and a lot of energy and a lot of lessons and God knows a lot of possibilities. So to me, the essence of unity, both in how it sees the Bible and as Wendy said, and as many of you know, I'm rather passionate about the Bible and rather impatient with people who insist on using it as a weapon to beat us up, as a weapon of fear, instead of seeing it as Charles Fillmore saw it, as seeing it as a travel journey, as a record of the process that we have to go through, a record of the process. And that means that everything isn't going to be perfect and sweetness and light when we walk on this path. Jesus made that pretty clear a whole lot of times because he knew us pretty well. And he knew how tempting it is to just discover the power of love, discover the presence of God, and think, wow, cool, nothing more to worry about. You know, now if there's any discomfort in my life, I must be doing something wrong. Yeah? Jesus said, not so fast. You know, this is a narrow path. If it were that easy, everybody would be in unity services this morning. You know, if our message were simply that you just have to understand unity and abundance will be yours and perfect relationships will be yours and obedient children will be yours and all that, we wouldn't be able to contain the crowds. We'd have to rent stadiums. No, it's much more complicated than that. It isn't that knowing the truth frees us from the power of the illusion. It's that knowing the truth allows us to work with the illusion in a more powerful and effective way. You know? Sometimes, and I must feel at home here because I wouldn't say this before, but because it can be discouraging. But sometimes I get the feeling that when I'm particularly attuned to the flow, when it's really moving through me, I can feel it, when I really am stretching my spiritual being, you have those moments, you have those times. Sometimes I think that the universe says, oh good, an open channel, send some more shadows over. Because we're not here to find ways to avoid the shadows, we're here to be the agents that transform those shadows into the light. Because the creative process needs both shadow and light. You know, it's not about calling this bad and trying to stay away from it and using our spiritual principles as a way of avoidance. It's about accepting the truth of who we are, accepting the presence of God in everything. We are unity. You know, we say that God is present in all of life. That means that God is present in the congresswoman and in the madman, you know, the man who decided to shoot. Equally the Christ. Not easy to hear. Not easy to work with. People think that unity is, some of my non-unity friends, some of my especially, well, I won't say especially my Episcopalian friends, but it just happens to be true, think that this is some kind of soft, easy, cushy choice I've made. This is just, you know, sweetness and light and huggy, huggy, kissy, kissy, you know, everything will be fine and everything is good and we don't have to worry about anything because God is in charge, God is everywhere and God is good. Well, yeah, and it's a lot of work, isn't it? Yeah. Haven't you ever felt like you'd like to go back to the days when you didn't know all this stuff? When you could be a victim? I did victim really well. I did it really well. I mean, I miss that sometimes. But knowing this truth and moving forward with it, knowing our responsibility, knowing the power of our thoughts. Jesus said the law is sufficient for early stages of the journey. Don't do things, you know. Emmett Fox, in his book on wonderful book on the Ten Commandments, says that it isn't really so much you shall not, but you cannot. You know, you cannot kill because life is eternal, so don't waste the energy trying to do things you cannot do. You cannot steal because it's all one, you're only stealing from yourself. You're not going to understand that, just don't do it. You know, it's what I call the because I said so stage of spiritual awareness. You know, and every parent knows what that's about. You know, because I said so. I can't explain it right now. Ask me in 10 years, and I probably still won't be able to explain it, but I'll have 10 years to think about it. So it's an important stage. We need to get. We're at that point where you can't. You're not ready to understand the full principles at work here. So just don't waste yourself and don't destroy yourself trying to do things you cannot do. But Jesus said, move up from there. You know, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I say to you, love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you. Not because that was wrong, that was then. This is now. This is a higher level of awareness. And it's challenging, isn't it? It's challenging to know, because he said it isn't just what you do, it's what you're thinking. You know? You may not murder somebody, but if in your mind you are imagining them dead, you have added that negative energy to our collective consciousness. So it isn't just what you do, it's what you think, which is way more difficult, isn't it? It's way more difficult to be in the right mindset and to know that I can't go through life not, you know, perfectly obeying the law, but wishing in my heart every day that I could disobey the law, you know, lusting in my heart, as Jimmy Carter said, you know, without that having an effect in the world. And the more I know that and the more I understand it, the more responsible I have to be about, you know, about what we do here together, about what I'm here to accomplish